Nintendo has evolutionized open world games not once but twice. The first time was with Breath of the Wild, and the second time was with Tears of the Kingdom. They really mastered what makes open world games special. They make them large and expansive, but filled with tons of activities and wonderment that keeps the player engaged and enjoying it for long periods of time. Nintendo truly are masters at this genre now. And most open worlds should be looking to this as kind of an example of what they should be doing in their open world, making it vast and expansive, making it filled of wonder and things to do. The question is, should Nintendo start making more of their games open world? Let's talk about it. Something that I've been hearing ever since Breath of the Wild is this Breath of the Wild moment. It's a moment where a video game kind of finally opens up and expands from what it once was into like a new era, a new modern style, and it typically refers to making it more open world, making it more vast and expansive. I remember when Kirby's Forgotten Land was kind of shown off for the first time, and everyone was expecting this to be the next kind of Breath of the Wild. This is supposed to be the next open world. This is supposed to be Kirby's big foray into kind of this more expansive universe. And what we ended up getting was this kind of more Super Mario 3D World style Kirby game. And don't get me wrong, it is phenomenal. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't like this game for what it was. I do think there are people who were expecting this to be, again, more Breath of the Wild like. And I think something that people kind of want or anticipate is that this is like the next step for Kirby. And then they're going to want to look forward to the next step of Kirby. And I don't really think Nintendo is looking at all their IPs and thinking next step as far as like making it more open or making it more vast. I feel like Nintendo has decades old IPs that are very rooted in these kind of genres. For example, if you make a Mario game, a 3D Mario game, it has to be a 3D platformer. You can't switch that up because then it will no longer be a mainline Mario game. With Kirby, Kirby has to have the ability to suck up monsters. He has to have that kind of floaty mechanic, or else it's not really a Kirby game. So the question would be, if you were to make Kirby open world, how would you handle things like traversal? The things that make open world games fun is that they feel expansive and almost limitless, yet there is a kind of physic to the world. There's a kind of law that kind of slows you down. That way, it's not too easy of a game. With Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they have like the whole like resource gathering thing and like weapon degradation, things that kind of hinder you from going everywhere you want to go exactly when you want to get there. You kind of have to work for it. And that's where that kind of satisfaction comes from, is when you finally get to a place, you know you worked your butt off to get there. You had the proper resources to do so. And if you were to do that and add it into a bunch of other games, it doesn't really work the same way. You have to find a way to make them limited. And I feel like it's hard to make an open world game and have the right limits on it. I think a lot of people look at like Horizon as like a bad example sometimes, where it feels very open world and it looks very vast and there's no real like necessarily one way to go kind of thing. But then they have like the big tall mountains that you can't scale, and it just quickly makes you remember that there are very much a lot of limits to this game that kind of, for some people, take away from their enjoyment. Versus Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom learn to kind of hide their limits with this ability to like climb wherever you want, build whatever you want kind of thing, where you feel like you can do whatever you want if you have your mind to it and you have the resources. I think another thing people don't really take into account to these big open worlds is that they take a lot of time to develop. Breath of the Wild took 6 years. Tears of the Kingdom is another game that took roughly 6 years. Nintendo can't spend 6 years developing all these games into open world games. It's just not really feasible. Nintendo has a system of releasing games very frequently, and Nintendo gamers are used to receiving a lot of games very frequently. So if you were to stretch them out between the 6-year timeline in development, I don't think you would get that same kind of reaction from the audience. I think a lot of people would be very mad about it. And even if you do get these open world games, not everyone is a big fan of open world games. So you'd be losing a big audience of people who waited 6 years to get a game they didn't want. I think one of the big criticisms that a lot of Nintendo games get is that they're very formulaic. They don't have a lot of surprises. Now, obviously, with your Legend of Zeldas and your Marios, there are a lot of surprises. But if you look at things like Kirby's Forgotten Land, it is very much what you expect a Kirby 3D game to be, without really varying it up too much, minus the fact that it's 3D and they have like the super swallow mode or whatever. But in the end of the day, it is still just 2D Kirby in a 3D environment. If you look at things like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, that is like the pinnacle of 2D platforming, and it's what Donkey Kong has always done best. And I think a lot of these newer Nintendo fans really want all these old IPs to be like refreshened up with like this Breath of the Wild moment, and I just don't think it's really feasible when you consider the fact that these games are special for a good reason. They have their own way of playing, and a lot of times it doesn't translate very well into an open world environment or even into a vaster environment. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom work so well because Legend of Zelda, in its heart of hearts, has always been an adventure game. It's always been a game that's about puzzle solving and exploring and kind of playing around with all your different accessories. And Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom just took that and opened it up immensely. And I feel like that's the reason why that game specifically translates very well into the open world environments. But if you were to take something like Donkey Kong and say like, okay, this is now going to be an open world 3D platformer. Why? I don't think platforming games really work out all that well in an open world environment. Yeah, you can have platforming mechanics, but you can't really have like the whole game be open world and platforming. That doesn't really, it just doesn't really make sense. There's a reason why 3D platformers segmented off into like different like levels kind of. It works best when you have a beginning to a level and an end to a level. Mario is the game that kind of started off the platformers, and that's always been its like essence. And it's kind of like you see with Mario Odyssey, or even more with Bowser's Fury, where they kind of dip their toes into like what an open world platformer can be. And don't get me wrong, those games are fantastic, they're phenomenal, but Mario Odyssey is still segmented as it should be. And Bowser's Fury, as great as it is just a little bit of a bite of what you would expect. And while we're on the topic of Bowser's Fury, let's talk about why I think we haven't really got a new Mario game. I do think Bowser's Fury was kind of a sneak peek of what the next Mario game is going to be, and I do think Mario is going to go into this kind of open world style of game, but I don't think you can do that with everybody, considering the amount of time it's been since we had a Mario game. Mario Odyssey came out at the launch of the Nintendo Switch, and we still haven't got a mainline 3D Mario game in the time that we got two big open world Zelda games. So again, I think it can be done if Nintendo really puts their mind to it and their money and their time. And I feel like, again, if you were to do everything open world, you wouldn't have the time to really develop them and have your Nintendo fan base be happy with the cadence of releases. I think you need games like Donkey Kong, you need games like Kirby, you need games like Splatoon that can come out and be more focused on what they do, so that games like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild can be as expansive as they are and allow them to have as much time as they need to cook properly. To sum it all up, I think Nintendo, as ingenious as they are, don't have the money, time, or the audience to really spend 6 years on every single IP to release a great, fantastic open world game. And I feel like it wouldn't be smart to make every single game open world or this kind of Tears of the Kingdom style of game. I think let those games do their thing and let other games do their thing. And that seems like what Nintendo's planning on doing. Only the future is going to tell us more. But overall, those are my final thoughts. Do me a favor and like the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, as it does help me out tons. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Would you guys want to see a more open style world of every game?